I really like this question. Who would Aang's toughest foe be here? And I think this question perfectly highlights the difference in villains from Korra to The Last Airbender, because for Aang, he had to defeat them for the sole purpose of, ending the 100-Year War that happened. Yes, there's more stuff in the graphic novels, but that will come up later. For Korra, she not only had to be able to beat these characters, but she needed to beat them in a battle of ideology. Because for Aang, he already had most of the world unified against not wanting to be, trying to kick out the Fire Nation. He was trying to end a 100-Year War. For Korra, she technically lives within Aang's era of peace, but she has more and more issues that are coming up that were suppressed because of that 100-year conflict that are now being given rise. And we actually even see some of these conflicts during the Last Airbender graphic novels. So running through this list, I'm immediately knocking out Unalaq and Kovira, because both of them fill a very similar role to Ozai. You have the colonizer and you have the imperialist, both things that Aang has technically dealt with during the 100-Year War, and his position as the Avatar would actually be enough to be able to oust any claims that they have that what they are doing is right. In fact, Korra had this opportunity, but the reason she wasn't able to do that is because, one, she either was not in the state that she needed to be, either maturity-wise or simply physically-wise in the case of Kovira, to be able to make the decision and carry out the action she needed to defeat these two. Aang, I feel like, even if we're talking about like younger Aang versus adult Aang, I think he would be able to take on these two and still have the rest of the world on his side for doing so. That leaves Zahir and Amon, and I think a lot of people will immediately jump to Zahir being the one that Aang would have to struggle with the most. But I genuinely think it's Amon, and the reason for that actually comes from the graphic novels, and it's because Amon represents something that Aang could never deal with in his lifetime. When it comes to Zahir, yes, he is arguably a master airbender, despite the fact that he, within like a week, learns airbending to the point where he is able to take out other seasoned benders, but that's not just it. It's not just how powerful he is. It's the fact that no one else really knows how to fight an airbender. This is the same advantage Aang had after being frozen for 100 years. No one knew what to do when faced against an airbender. In Season 4 of The Legend of Korra, this actually flips, because now that there are more airbenders in the world, there are people who have methods of dealing with them. And I don't think Aang loses in a battle of ideology against Zahir, because Zahir is effectively a more aggressive Guru Petit. For Aang, what a huge part of Aang's journey was being able to go forth and realizing that the Avatar does not need to give up worldly attachments. In fact, it's a detriment if they do so. That's not to say that they should be so attached that they never want to let them go. It's it's about finding a balance between the two. Yang Chen, in some side material, even has a conversation about this with Aang. Even in his last conversation before his fight with the Fire Lord, she even tells him the Avatar does not need to get rid of worldly attachments because the Avatar is still human. You can't trust a, wise old spirit to solve the problems of humans, because what would they know about how humans live? For Zahir, he wants to remain detached from the world, not having any of these worldly possessions anymore, or any wants and desires. I do think both of them would probably be well versed with Guru Lahima's teachings, but Aang would actively try to avoid them because he understands that his position as the Avatar is greater than his position as an individual airbender. He would probably respect Zahir's determination to try and follow the teachings of Guru Lahima, but he would know that this is not a route that the Avatar needs to take. Also, I think he could easily take Zahir in a fight. Not only is he the Avatar, when Zahir was fighting Tenzin, Zahir could not beat him. He needed the rest of the Red Lotus in order to take out Tenzin. Because he may have mastered airbending in probably the shortest amount of time, he still could not beat someone who was doing it his entire life. And that leaves Amon. Now, earlier I said that the graphic novels, again, are more important here because they sow the seeds that later take root to lead to Amon's revolution. And it's the difference between benders and non-benders. This is an issue that has always been around, but it has been suppressed due to other things that have been happening throughout the world, i.e. the 100-Year War. There, everyone was being subjugated by the Fire Nation, so even if you were an Earthbender or a Waterbender, underneath Fire Nation rule, unless you could firebend, you were not allowed to bend in public. after the Fire Lord is defeated and Aang and Zuko try to regain territories in order to try and make a more equal society, something really important happens, especially in the graphic novel Imbalance. So spoilers for that. But Aang is faced with a huge divide in Crane Town, which I think eventually becomes Republic City, and it's a huge split between the benders and non-benders in terms of, gaining industry, because a lot of benders are just like, oh, this is our natural talent, we should just be able to do this. But a lot of non-benders want to bring in more industrialized machines and be like, hey, this is how we can get ahead, we should be allowed to do this as well. It culminates in a mini revolution against the two, or sorry, mini civil war, and Aang is forced to put a stop to it. Now, he's able to quell the civil war for the time being, but it's never something that he can actually pick back up, and not something that he fully is able to comprehend. He's able to understand both sides' disagreement on this, but as the Avatar, this is one of his failings that Korra later has to come in and actually try to rectify. Which is why I think ideal wise, he would probably be able to beat Amon in a battle of ideology and finally being able to come to terms with one of his failures, but it would definitely be the most uphill battle that he has ever faced. And that's not even touching the fact that he is a bloodbender. Yes, technically he does defeat Yakone by going into the Avatar state, who was also a bloodbender, but that's not taking account into the difference in influence. Amon is a fascist who is trying to gather around everyone, trying to say that, hey, your neighbors are your enemies. We have the superiority here. It's not about benders. It's about making sure everyone's equal. By taking away something that effectively that is a part of people's daily lives. You don't have bending, so no one should have bending. And that's a sentiment that a lot of people end up falling for. He may be able to take Amon in a physical confrontation, but he also, as the Avatar, needs to be able to rectify the, ideals that he has spread throughout the world. The reason why Korra was able to deal with that is because she was able to, oust Amon as being a fraud, but that doesn't get rid of the tensions between benders and non-benders, and that's a huge thing that he would also have to deal with, which is why I think Amon would be his toughest foe to fight, not physically, but in a battle of ideals. And you know what? Probably also physically, because I think out of all of them, he probably is the most dangerous one comparatively. But that's a topic for another day. I hope all of that made sense. And I know this was very long, but I do want to make more stuff about Avatar. This is fun.